worthwhile. So, thank you. Yeah. Don't be perfect. Don't be perfect. No one is.
Yeah. One thing I will add on to that, totally agree. I mean, I think that kind of starting on, like when I started Pro Bartender, it was end of 2015, and so kind of before, like, not necessarily before filters and all that stuff, but like the visual aesthetic of what you're doing has become so much more important. But I think to the degree that it starts to overshadow you delivering value to the people that are engaging with you, then it's no longer relevant. You know, I think approaching social media and influencer marketing, it's all about value, you know, and so when the focus is shifted towards yourself, that's when you really start to become not authentic. I think authenticity and genuine, those have become buzzwords in social media, and so sometimes it's hard to like, what does that even mean? But I think it's as simple as like, are you adding value to the people that are engaging with you, and are you giving them something to consume that will actually help them in what they're doing, or help them in like why they're following you? Because if it's just about your filter, then
yeah, is it for you or for them?
Yeah, like if people are following you like as a photographer, is that important? Yes, it's important, just because most people are looking for visual inspiration and stuff, so the filters might be important. But you know, again, if it overshadows value, then it's not important.
And just to kind of close the loop on this question, I think to Elliott's point and also to what Kelli said, and I think there's even an element of consciousness, I think, worldwide. And again, going back to this human element, what is your moral compass as well? Like, why are you partnering with this brand? Is it because there's something that maybe affected you in your life where, you know, maybe it was a health concern, or maybe it's something that you support philanthropically? So there are other ways too that you can still very much so hold your granola bar, but you know, if you're, you know, been vegan because you have celiac disease or whatever, I think the narrative really has to tie in there to where it does make sense.
Agreed. Desmond, do you want to say something just 4 for 4?
Of course. Are you opening the loop back up? Okay.
This is going to be the question that goes for the entire panel.
I mean, you could have like a credible influencer, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get credible content. So a lot of times, you know, it goes to what, you know, everybody was saying here, like, you know, fit is super important. Does your brand fit like what this influencer is all about? When I first got to this agency that I'm working at now, Premier, we were working with DeMarcus Cousins. So he was a basketball player for the New Orleans Pelicans. He was popular among our target, but like his posts of him making like red beans and rice, I don't buy it. I don't think Boogie Cousins makes red beans and rice. So like, you know, it wasn't a fit in that respect. I mean, somebody makes it for him.
Yeah, and then pays him to post it. That's the circle of life that we're all about. Go for it.
Sorry,
Go for it.
This is a hot topic because I think there is such an influx of influence in the world. The other thing is like disclosure, I feel like has become so important. And so many people have taken a lot of heat when they haven't been honest about like, yeah, this was sponsored, this was an ad, and it's like, just be honest about it and explain the context of why you were excited to be sponsored, or why you were excited to partner with this brand versus this really fake sort of feeling like, oh, it just popped up, a strategic counter.
Just keep the mic and we can, go ahead.
And actually, if they aren't disclosing and they were sponsored, that's against FTC rules.
It is,
so
and that's why I was going to say,
disclosure.
I'm just going to switch questions because, Kelli, I already wanted to ask you about compliance because I know you've done a ton of work on it. In 2018, only 11% of influencer accounts were compliant with FTC guidelines about social media endorsement. So that's very low, very low. With this industry growing so fast, how do you see this battle going? This is kind of like something that I know you've done some work on.
Yeah, we have done lots of work with brands like Google and Facebook and Pinterest and all of these big, you know, digital giants, icons. And I think there's a real heightened sense of what is, you know, what are my privacy rights? What are the security rules that you're following? You know, what are the FTC rules? And so people are much more aware. But right, like our guard drops, right? If I need an Uber, this is sort of a weird example. If I need an Uber right now, I'm willing to tell someone where I live, which is so crazy. And I think when it comes to social, more permissive sometimes because they want to be a part of something. But I think it always cracks me up when I see comments that become like if someone didn't disclose, and then what the commentary ends up being on the post is that like, they didn't disclose, this was totally sponsored, I've seen this brand with a bunch of influencers, and it's like, well, that ruined the whole point. So I think, again, just being upfront and giving context. I don't know about the laws, but I know that people in the world are aware that there are rules that are supposed to be followed, and they expect to see that, and they're okay with the acknowledgement of it.
Sure. Elliott, do you feel like the laws are pretty, so you obviously have sometimes sponsored content. Do you ever feel like you don't know the parameters? Like, do you feel like they're clearly defined and they're accessible, or is this something that people are just ignoring?
At this point, if you're not disclosing it, you're just ignoring it because if you're getting paid like to post, you have to disclose that. And so the brands and at least the agencies and partners that I work with, it's clearly spelled out in the contracts, like must say ad or sponsor or partner. Like they'll give you the right language behind that. So if you're not, I would kind of question how that partnership came about and some like the logistics behind that because you should disclose it. I mean, I also think like from my perspective, it's something to be proud of. Like if you like for me personally, like doing this full time, I'm super proud of like the partners that I have, and I think from an influencer perspective, a lot of people think that if you do a lot of sponsored stuff, you're selling out. But I don't think that's necessarily the case, and so I think it's just something to disclose, and it should be in the language of the contracts and stuff like that. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Right.
To close, or maybe reopen the loop again. From an agency perspective, it's interesting because influencer marketing is still very much green. So many data things are starting to come to the table. Lawyers are now even saying, hey, I want to switch to social media, intellectual property, and oftentimes, as the agencies are growing, some of them don't have someone who's on their business and legal affairs team, so we technically can't disclose, like this is not a contract, it's an agreement, but there still needs to be hashtag ad or sponsor. Those are the words in which it can't be hashtag partner, can't be hashtag gifted. That is a definite, but I still think even as influencer marketing continues to grow, more and more data, information, and resources will become available that fits into the compliance realm of things.
Thank you. All right, guys, let's go into the rules of engagement. First off, we obviously throw this word around a lot, but sometimes it's not super clearly defined, so whoever wants to speak on how you would define engagement.
Simple, like it's just a metric to sort of like measure this sort of the participation in your social media posts across the major platforms that you work in, so Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, whatever.
So when it comes to Instagram, engagement is simply just a like or a comment, but I like to take it a step further and talk about the quality of that engagement. If I see an influencer and I like her red dress that she's wearing, and I comment and I'm like, hey, love the dress, where did you get it? Would love to rock it at Tails.
Red dress emoji.
And she's giving me the red dress emoji, that doesn't really help me. Like, for me, I always look out when I'm vetting influencers to say, it's this style, it might be even sold out, here's an alternative. Like, that type of conversation where you're informing me to help inspire my purchase.
I'm building the relationship.
Exactly. So that's what I would define, and when it comes to partnerships, that's the type of thing that I look for.
I've been engaging all wrong. I send 3 emojis back. Thank you very much.
Well, I think that's just from like the consumer perspective is like, I don't care what your statistics are. I don't care what the metrics are. Engagement to me, as someone on the other side, or has it been a meaningful exchange, right? Like you gave me something that was really inspiring or interesting, or thanks for the new red dress. Therefore, I'm going to give you attention back through a like or a comment. So, from people, from humans, from all of us, because at the end of the day, we're all just people. It's that exchange that feels meaningful.
So I gauge engagement kind of twofold. To your point about like you have the engagement, the metrics like the likes and the comments, the impressions, your reach, the things that when you have a partnership, you're delivering that information over to the brand as far as like how that post or the content actually performed. And then for me personally, like I gauge engagement with the people that I'm interacting with, because there are a lot of things there that you can't necessarily put metrics behind. You know, those are the messages that you get. Those are the things like, for example, hearing your booze. You know, that's something that kind of trying to promote the overall health and wellness of the industry. You know, you'll get people that might reach out and they take the time to share like their experience and maybe that some of their struggles with like mental illness and how something is really helping them to get over or that struggle. And it's like, how do you deliver that to a brand that's not like, oh, this is one message, right? But that post or that what you put out might really shift someone's way of thinking. So for me, I kind of gauge it on like the analytics side, and then I also gauge it on like what has this done for like the connection, the relationship that I have with my audience, because I think that's something that again isn't necessarily tangible, but you feel it, you can see it. So that's kind of like my viewpoint on it.
Totally. And so like, how exciting is it when you DM someone and they write back?
Oh yeah.
Like, oh my god, and I'm a geeky fangirl.
Or you like tag in a story and they repost it. Big Frida reposted my story once and it was the best day.
Yeah,
It was.
Yeah. Someone wrote me back once and asked me a question, like, oh, I'm gonna be in Chicago, what do you think about this? And I think I took a picture and sent it to all my girlfriends, like the biggest nerd alive.
Oh, same. I repost
Podcaster.
posts. Repost.
Yeah.
So obviously the new ethos in digital marketing is focused on this relevance and engagement, and it's far more valuable now, or more valued than number of followers and impressions. How did we get here? Obviously when Instagram started, it was all about visibility, it was all about impressions, number of followers, and now it's become like much more tailored back and curated. I mean, do you guys have any feedback as to how it evolved to that way? Wow, what's going on over there?
Is that for you?
You're like that for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Kelli. Should have been like that when you guys walked in here. I don't even know what I just said.
Let's go down next week. We're gonna reciprocate. All right. Well, obviously the best engagements are reciprocal, like what we just did right there. You know. So, but you know, when the social media platform itself allows for more reciprocal engagements, the more powerful it can be. I mean, you know, it's not just about likes and shares and stuff like that. Now, like, you know, with all the different creative spaces on Instagram and stuff, like, you can have a meaningful experience with an influencer, celebrity, or something. You know, like Martha Stewart's, like, show, for instance, like, this live show that she does on Facebook, like, in the comment section, she addresses questions from the general public. And if she actually addresses, like, a question that you put in the comment section, that's a meaningful experience for you as a user. So creating those sort of meaningful interactions, those reciprocal interactions with all the new creative spaces that are out there on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, all those platforms is the best kind of engagement.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Desmond said, at the end of the day, human need is connection. So I think we've applied that same ethos and thinking to these platforms, but also businesses want to play too. Like, they want a sip of the Grey Goose honeydews or Kool-Aid, whatever. So they have realized and understand that, hey, not only can we reach our consumer deeper, get to know them, not just based on a census that goes out or et cetera, we can really tap into what they want to see on our platforms, and they're willing to add money to it. So I definitely think as businesses have recognized, engagement has really shifted because they in turn kind of influence what they desire to see, whether it's for their clients or themselves.
And so for Shanika and Elliott on both sides of it, do you find just with actual product or service traction, are you seeing more sales, quote unquote, out of engagement as opposed to when impressions were sort of like reigning supreme?
I guess to Elliott's point, some of these things we can track, like a personal message or someone showing up and sharing their testimony is still ethereal and wonderful, but when it comes to
I'm talking like bottom line stuff.
A lot of mine, I would say yes, because, for instance, if I have an event where I like consumer foot traffic, and I know that an influencer's audience will respond and drive that, that's awesome. And so for us, that's really successful. That's my answer for that question.
Don't give away all your secrets.
I don't mind. You guys can take them. Yeah, I mean, I think for me personally, like, I've never really like sold anything. Like, I don't have products. I mean, the most that I've done is put out some digital guides and things like that. But for me personally, like, I'm not selling things. So bottom line stuff, I guess, as far as like moving sales, I think it's a little different for me versus like the travel industry or fashion industry where you're actually moving product and like people aren't hitting me up to see what I wear because I wear the same thing every day, which is like jeans and a black shirt. Like, this is like me like stepping out of my comfort zone.
Patagonia.
Yeah. Lululemon actually. That sponsored.
I knew that. I was testing you.
But I think in terms of like brand building, you know, that's kind of where I see some people can reside on the brand building side of, you know, if I'm working with this person and this person is credible, then it raises the overall awareness or whatever. So I think it's always connected back to like what's the ultimate goal of the campaign or the partnership, and then just making sure that you're hitting on those goals.
Sure. I think at this point we're just competing for last with Jacob Breyer's next door. Do you guys see that? It's Jacob Breyer's next door. Moving on. So Kelly, let's go back to you, girl. Seeing how much emphasis people are putting into engagement when they're assessing successful campaigns and consumers are actually feeling affected by it, why do you think when it's used properly, it's getting like that attraction? For actual sales, like when you're talking to your consumers.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, so
Sorry.
basically like when you're talking to people, when you're going on your blind dates, I like that phrase, I'm gonna keep using it. Why do you think they feel that connection with the engagement that they experience, if they're experiencing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the connection comes from at the end of the day, we all want to feel part of something. We all want to feel like we belong. We all want to feel like we can relate to someone else. And I think what social media has done is they've made it possible that it's not just someone that lives next door or in your dorm room or that you work with. It's now like a chance to actually feel connected to people or a brand or something that maybe was always much further at arm's length. And now it's like, it's in our hand.
Yeah.
And it's like in your pocket and you are engaging in like intimate, like you're laying in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning when you have insomnia, scrolling, and maybe that causes more anxiety, or maybe you're like, oh, wow, that was just really cool. I just saw someone make some recipe that.
Yeah, but either way, those people are in bed with you.
You're
Literally.
people. Yeah. So I just think like it ultimately, when it works, it makes people feel a part of something.
Yeah.
And then that creates a meaningful relationship with the brand.
Do you think that some of the people that you speak with actually trust recommendations from influencers that they follow religiously as much as like their friends and family?
I do. I think the best influencers come with a sense of authority because they have a proven expertise in X topic. I think when it doesn't work, it feels shallow and vapid and just like another person talking about the same thing. But when that person has an authoritative reason for having such an outsized influence, I do think people trust it very much. Like if you hear from someone who actually is a badass at making cocktails, you're like, well, yeah, of course I trust you more than my brother. What does he know? Like, you know. So I do think when it, again, the authority and the expertise really makes it work.
Anyone else have anything to add on that? You don't have to, just opening it up. I want to wrap up the engagement section with just like, for everyone in the audience, what methods of engagement do you think are most effective? Like, what is some tool that they could take home and really like up their engagement ante right when they walk out of here and post about coming to this seminar?
I'll chime in for this. I think keep abreast on what Instagram rolls out. All of those elements in your Instagram stories, the polls, the music, the questions, quizzes, utilizing those features, they are made to contribute to engagement. It helps just further connect the influencer or the brand with consumers or their following. I also think in real life things are really awesome because then you can really kind of have a tactical, in the flesh experience there. And I know for some, maybe you're not hosting grand events, but if there's a cocktail special at the end of the summer that you really want to drive some folks to, like having that really brings the connection into fruition in a real life way. So those would be my two recommendations.
This is going to get a little more specific, but I really think live is a super effective way to engage people because it's more authentic than anything else. It's happening right now. There's no editing. This isn't like sort of like a prepackaged video or some sort of curated photograph. It's happening as we speak. And if you're a marketer and you're using live, you can sort of hack the platforms to figure out, okay, how can I make this the most engaging experience for all of the users? There was this pest control company that did a school play of these different taxidermy mice, and you got to choose how each of the mice died based on what emotion you chose. So they hacked sort of the interface of Facebook Live to turn it into a voting mechanism, so you could choose how the mice were going to die, being attacked by bears or to be instant combustion, stuff like that. You could. It really created that valuable engagement, and it can only happen in live.
We're going to need the link to that article.
I will say, what it comes across for me, and what I really aim for is getting people to take some sort of action. So like Shanika said, if it's in your Instagram stories or on a post, leaving a question in the caption and then having people respond. I think just anything to gauge response, to get people to take some sort of actionable step. I think that's really important in terms of engagement. So think about those things as you, for a practical takeaway, whatever you're looking to do, think about what action do you want people to take from that, and then what resources does the platform give you to encourage people to take that action, like the swipe up or whatnot. So.
Awesome, thanks guys.
Podcasts. Am I the only one that thinks podcasts are
You are not the only one. I love podcasts. I wish this were a podcast right now.
I think it's interesting how many influencers I'm seeing starting to do podcasts, and then a lot of them are filming themselves making the podcast, and then it's this entire new stream of content that's sort of all twisted in itself. But I like podcasts.
I'm there with you, girl.
I think it's that's something that we haven't really touched on, but talk about credibility. They have a following, they're subject matter experts. If you have a brand that's a good fit for a podcast, that's a huge play.
And also let's just talk about podcasts now. Kind of uncharted territory. It's kind of where full on social media now today was 5 years ago, where people are still trying to figure out how to navigate the podcast world and how to get them out there, and it'll be interesting, I guess, to watch it evolve.
I realize I don't even listen to music much anymore. I immediately think ooh, I've got a 45-minute commute or whatever it is, I'm gonna listen to a podcast.
I don't watch the news, I only listen to the Daily. I prefer it. That is how I get my news. Let's move on to personal brand and campaign building. So the first question I want to ask, I want to hear from both Desmond and Elliott on what is the benefit of a business partnering with an influencer, how you determine whether the partnership is right for both the business and the influencer's, sorry to use it, personal brand. That's going to go in quotes every time I say it today. Whoever wants to start, yeah.
All right, I'll jump in. So the benefit, I feel as a brand, and having worked with brands, and choosing influencers and stuff like that, is the sort of instant brand value you get. Certainly, you get sort of they amplify your message, and there's the credibility piece, but you get this sort of brand equity baked into using an influencer. I can tell this through the lens of an advertising campaign, but it's sort of an analogous thing where I worked on a brand called Esurance, and it was like we were trying to like sort of transition like our customer from like people who choose the cheapest possible car insurance to sort of like successful like millennial families, right? So young professionals, so that they would eventually turn into like valuable customers for Allstate. So we were choosing like a voice of the brand. Who's it going to be? And at the time, it was just it was during like The Office, so we chose John Krasinski. He played Jim in The Office. He becomes that character that he played, and basically everybody knew him as Jim from The Office. They didn't really know his name. But that character that he played came with like a perspective, a purpose, a sense of humor. All of those things were baked into his personality. So that, in turn, gave the brand that same personality. So I feel like that strategy works the same way with influencers, right? Like you sort of are borrowing off their personal equity.
And now he's Jack Ryan.
And now he's Jack Ryan. He's totally
Yeah,
different.
and people know his name now.
People know
His
his
real name, not
John
Jim from The
Krasinski.
Office.
Yeah, he's an amazing dude. Very funny. But I mean, he's not really like an influencer. But I felt like you're an activist though, because like you are sort of like trading off somebody's equity.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I mean, for me, the same way brands look to kind of partner with someone and tap into maybe their personal brand equity, I kind of look at it the same way. Like, do I want to be associated with that brand? What is kind of their voice and their personality, and what is their audience like? So for me, I kind of have some criteria in my mind. I think it's different per person. For me, I kind of fly by the seat of my pants sometimes. Like sometimes it might be like, do I want to have this experience? Do I want to work with this brand? Is the project is it cool? Is it fun? Do I think this is going to add value to my audience? Because there are a lot of partnerships that kind of sound and look really sexy, but then when you kind of get into the granular and you start looking at it, you realize it doesn't add value. So it just would maybe backfire a little bit. So you have to say no just as much as you say yes to partnerships. And I think maybe not being afraid to also like restructure the way those partnerships look. Like when a brand approaches you and say like, hey, this is our idea, this is what we want to do, we want to activate you and like build this partnership. You know your audience better than anybody. So taking that partnership and saying like, okay, well, I don't think this is necessarily going to work, so how about this? Like you can actually introduce other ideas into that. So those are some things to consider. But again, at the end of the day, I think it all goes back to value. Like what are you trying to accomplish and what are you trying to add to the people that are engaging with you? Because ultimately without that engagement back and without kind of hitting on those end goals, sometimes the partnerships are for naught.
Yeah, and I think the successful people say no. You can tell who's not saying no,
I think just to add to this, I mean, obviously, establishing digital brand evangelists are a huge benefit of partnering with influencers, but I see it as a way to support your bottom line. I think if you're not doing it, you should start, and you should consult someone who does have the strategy, like myself, to really plug, to really help understand if it's right for you, but how can we support your bottom line? Because at the end of the day, you want it to be a successful relationship between the influencer and the brand.
Sure, and you just keep that mic because I would love it if you would walk us through the selection process for businesses when they are looking for the right influencer for their campaigns.
Absolutely. If y'all haven't updated your Instagram, you probably already can see that, the numbers are no longer as relevant anymore. So obviously following is of importance, but I also, when I approach an influencer, like to ask for their insights, just to get a real sense of who they are, make sure that their followers aren't bots. If I'm looking to target folks in the Southern California region, and most of your followers happen to be from New York where you once lived, maybe that partnership isn't the right one for you. If you're approaching me asking for a comp at a hotel and I see no past hotel collaborations, and if I do see one and you're talking about your red dress that you're wearing and not the elements of the property, that's probably going to discourage my partnership there. I also really like to partner with influencers that can write or, have a little bit more than just the ability to take a photo. Y'all all on portrait mode. I know you can take photo. So for me, it's really about understanding what other elements or components can they be on camera. Do they have video component? Can they write? Do they like to even host events even? So I'm really looking for various elements that of course align with the client or brand's goals, but those are just a couple of things that I like to look for when vetting influencers.
Sure. And will you just explain to everyone when you were talking about analytics, will you explain to them if they don't have a business page, they aren't seeing that? So
Correct, that's a great point. So yes, you have to make sure that you're going in the back end and making sure that you're a business facing.
yeah, you gotta switch to business, guys.
But even so, there are other ways, like if you are, maybe you're on social and I can go, or excuse me, on a blog, I ask for those type of back-end analytics as well, because you can do that through Google, which is another resource. But, or if you've done a campaign before where they provided a trackable link, oftentimes you can ask the brand or client, hey, can I see how my performance was for this specific campaign? I'd love to utilize this in my deck for future opportunities.
Thank you. Cool. So I know that we've talked a little bit about like call to action and swipe up and discount codes, but I just wanted to check in with Kelli and Shanika about how that actually drives consumer action. Do you find swipe up codes, discount codes, like personal discount codes, things like that, link in bio to purchase, like are those effective? Are you seeing traction from that, or are those just things that we're all duped by daily?
Those that are very clear and obvious. Again, the transparency I think is key. I think when there's a backlash is when someone doesn't know if something's an affiliate link or not, or they can't tell if it's something that you bought yourself or were gifted. So I just keep going back. Like, if you're posting a cute, I'm going fashion skirt, like just say swipe up buy. Like, just be honest. Like, I want people to buy this. Like, right now it's the Nordstrom sale. Like, it's like everyone posting stuff is, I think the people that are doing it well are being very clear. And actually, I saw someone recently even explain how it works as an influencer during this time of the year. And it was like, she kind of raised the curtain on the way that works and was making it clear that this is a business, and that's okay. I think it's shady business when you're not being honest. So I have a theme. Just be honest, be real.
To Kelly's point, another huge component that I forgot to mention when it comes to vetting, I do look at the frequency of sponsored posts from influencers. If it's more than 25%, that to me means your audience is likely fatigued with every other post being a hashtag or sponsored, unless there is some transparency or a narrative behind that. The Instagram bio is a hot real estate place. I think less people are paying attention to that and more people are looking at stories, and we know that to be a fact. So, I like to, when it comes to influencers, if you have a long relationship with Lululemon, and I've seen you work out at Lululemon, and then it naturally evolves into a partnership, and then from there, you're telling that narrative and saying, hey, I'm actually going to be hosting a yoga class with Lululemon, please come through. Like, those types of things where I can see foot traffic at an event are certainly effective. And whether that's the link in bio or the link in the stories, it to me tells me as a consumer that, hey, this is something that's been in this influencer's life, they have an authentic relationship to it, and I trust them to really be true in this campaign.
There's no gaps in their storyline.
Exactly.
Yes, no gaps. There's one woman that I follow, she's in New York. She loves her Yeti Tumblr more than anyone, and she is even funny about being like, hey, tag Yeti, like, when are you gonna call me? And I think that's really her being funny and honest about the fact that, like, her personal brand is her business. She likes her Yeti, she had it on the beach drinking her cocktails in it, she wants them to sponsor her. And I thought it was charming and kind of hilarious.
Yeah. Well, at least she knows her audience.
It's like, I did that with Biscoff cookies. I don't know if you guys like fly Delta or anything.
We all follow that journey that you went on.
Yeah, I love them. If anyone has them right now,
Who flew Delta today? Give the man what he wants. Does anyone have a Biscoff? All right, sorry, we'll find you one later. Oh, that's it? That's all you want to
I'm just
say? We can end it at that.
It
right now, Elliott, what question is it gonna be? Okay, so, actually, we just did that one. I told you guys to tell me if I was behind on there. Okay, so, it's too many buttons. Okay, so we've seen like Selena Gomez, we've seen Gordon Ramsay, Jamie Oliver, like, so we have like specific chefs, we have celebrities, we see them endorsing all these things, right? How do you pick? How do you pick Kylie or Selena versus like, you know, Chef Gordon Ramsay? Like, how did Coca-Cola pick Selena Gomez instead of like a chef or a culinary person? How do you pick them over maybe just like an influencer personality who's non-celebrity? You know, how are people making these decisions? How do you think people are consuming these things? Do you think that Selena Gomez drinking a Coca-Cola is as believable as you eating a Biscoff cookie? I don't.
I think who you work with and the deliverable, like it's a post or whatever, I think it's not the end all be all. I think social media is supplemental to the overall strategy and campaign of what you're looking to accomplish. So if you're working with a Selena Gomez or a Kylie Jenner, it's because it connects to the overall strategy. If you're working with me, I don't see myself as the end all be all of a campaign. I think I'm a segment of that. And so my segment might be drawing awareness. Like for example, I have a partnership with, and I don't do a lot in this space, but with West Elm. And part of that is like, okay, they have a large audience already. They don't necessarily need to tap into mine unless they have some sort of purpose for that. So that might be, we really want to start going towards a cocktail community and spirits community because home entertaining is so big. So it's like, okay, these people that make drinks and bartend, they're more than likely, they don't want to go out, or if they do go out, or they want to have people that are over to their house, and they want to entertain. Obviously, you want nice stuff. So those types of things, I think, is just the people that you work with are connected to what you're trying to accomplish. And I think I'm glad to see it's transitioning. But before, I think it was, to Shanika's point, like if you have a big following, like we want that person, we want this person, and then now it's like you can see somebody with 1 million followers and they don't really do anything. Versus somebody, I'd much rather take someone with 5,000 followers who has a strong connection with their audience versus somebody that has 500,000 and they only care about their content.
And then, Desmond, you obviously have worked with celeb influencers.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to brand fundamentals, sort of shared values. So for instance, if you are, let's talk about Zatarain's, since we're in New Orleans, and that's a brand that I work on, and I touch it every day. So if there's a brand belief that that Zatarain's has, and there's a brand archetype, and there's a purpose, there's all these sort of things baked into what makes Zatarain's Zatarain's. You want to find an influencer that A, is sort of credible in the category, but B, has shared values. So you can find somebody who if Zatarain's jazzes up the ordinary, jazzes up the the ordinary dinner, you want to find somebody who sort of challenges the mundane, right? Sort of brings things to life in an interesting way. That seems like a shared value. If Zatarain's brand archetype is the jester, you want to find somebody who's sort of entertaining, and sort of maybe a little bit goofy. So those shared values and those shared fundamentals are super important. Otherwise, you end up with Boogie Cousins making a $2 box of rice.
Okay, great, thank you guys. Shanika, I want to talk about some of these connectivity apps. So as of 2017, there were 420 companies solely dedicated to influencer marketing. I'm sure now there's 1,000 or more. A portion of these are all about creating these connectivity databases. So essentially, they're databases that these companies compile of influencers, whether they're geographically segmented or by influencer type, beauty, travel, etc. Are they useful? Do you think that there are ways that people are finding potential influencers to work with their businesses, especially in a room like this? We might have small brands in here, we might have local venues. Is that something that you can tap into, or do you feel like they're ineffective?
I have some thoughts about this. So connecting apps, I think, certainly have their place. Say, for instance, I'm trying to activate influencers in Traverse City, Michigan. I don't know nobody there. Like that will help me at least get a starting point to find some folks in that market. But the biggest thing that these apps are missing is the human element. Like we all have discretion, we all can see if someone's being a suspect or not. So I think if you are utilizing these apps, make it a starting point, not the end all be all, and then further add those vetted components to see how they can really fit your campaign that you're launching.
So you can like use it as like almost like a Google tool, but then do the outreach yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I personally think, because again, the space is still very green, the technology, at the end of the day, Instagram is constantly going to change. I often, if I am having a conversation, because we do get solicited a lot with apps like this, I always ask like, okay, what KPIs are you actually measuring? But did you just see Instagram's update? Like, how are you guys quickly evolving to even capture that? So I think, if it makes sense for you and what you're looking for, certainly do your research, conduct interviews, ask questions, but I think it's a mix of both. I personally just utilize my discretion, but yeah, they're helpful in some ways.
Thank you. All right, if we want to stay on time, it is time for your 2-minute influencer campaign pitch. Yeah, it's basically like Shark Tank. They're Shark Tanking us on like super generic styles of venues that can be found anywhere in the world. And I just basically asked them to put together a social, like a sample social media influencer campaign that a venue of this style could use. And they each got assigned a different style of venue. And I need to get my timer up. And Kelli, you were first to introduce yourself. You're gonna be first to tell us what you came up with. 2 minutes on the clock. I don't care if you go over 2 minutes. And you were assigned a local neighborhood bar. We've got beer, we've got sports, we've got pool tables. I didn't put it up there for you guys because I did it on my computer.
Here we go. I mean, you guys can obviously tell this is somewhere I hang out in a lot. So, for me, this came back to why does a local neighborhood bar exist? What is the role it plays in people's lives? And I immediately just started thinking about Cheers. The reason everyone loves their local watering hole is because you feel like it's where everyone knows your name. You might not go for the ambiance. You're probably definitely not going for the ambiance. Inevitably there are going to be specials. But really what makes a neighborhood bar stand out are the characters that are ponied up to the bar every night and the interesting people you might meet at any given point in time when you walk in. And so I think a really effective, interesting campaign would be less about what you're selling or what you're promoting and who are the neighbors who are actually there in the space. Who are the people that if you come on a Tuesday, you're gonna meet, Tuesday night Tony, and here he is, here's what he's all about. And it just feels like a way that it taps back, for me, this is my sell to you, that it taps back into what is the reason a neighborhood bar exists. It's to bring people together. So don't try to sell products, sell the people, and sell the community and sell the neighborhood. And I think that is a much more compelling way to stand out because you're gonna use your best assets who are already the loyal people hanging out on a Tuesday night.
I love it. Drink like Tony. What does Tony drink, do you think?
I mean, Tony's
Bud Light.
definitely, I'd say Miller Lite guy.
Yeah.
Like maybe he'd get bougie and have like a Stella because he was trying to impress someone, but
So ritzy.
he wants a Miller Lite. He
I love
wants some salty popcorn, and he's a happy guy.
That was 2 minutes. Good job. Perfect timing. All right. Elliott, you ready for this? It's where you hang out most often. Elliott got assigned a Vegas nightclub. Look at that. Look at that greatness you're sipping on, Elliott. You guys know it. There's DJs, there's smoke machines, there's short skirts, bottle service, a line to get in. We know it, we love it. 2 minutes. Go.
So I think, depending on what the nightclub is looking to accomplish, if the nightclub is looking to do something and touch more on the industry, I think having guest bartenders coming out, that are big names in the industry. I'm gonna take 2 roads, sorry, I'm babbling, but one might be if the nightclub is looking to touch more on the industry and establish some industry credibility, and kind of shift away from just like we're a strict nightclub where you come and party and everything. Having guest bartenders from the industry come out and like bartend there for a night, I think that's an awesome way to get people to not only just touch on the nightclub crowd, but also like to get bartenders and people in the industry there. Another might be most nightclubs, especially Vegas, are connected to a property. So showing more of a holistic experience. Like you're not just coming to Vegas to go to this nightclub, but we want you to experience everything that we have to offer, and it's part of like something bigger. So it might be the food that is part of the property, it might be the drinks, it might be the pool, it might be a full day or a full weekend, and the campaign might be tied to like the guys' weekend or a staycation if you live in Vegas. You know, so it's reshaping the way that you think about nightclubs, and based on what you want to accomplish, do that. So those are the two ideas that I had as far as touching more in the industry and getting guest bartenders in there, or guest appearances, and then also like showcasing like what else you have to offer as a brand and as that nightclub, other than just going there and partying.
I love that. And also with the guest bartender thing, you're also elevating the product. So your guests that are typical clientele also now are experiencing craft cocktails, which maybe they don't frequent craft cocktail bars because they are at a nightclub.
Well, I think I feel like I'm rushing because I'm like, I'm sure.
You'll know.
Yeah.
You'll hear it.
I
There
think
you
that I've never worked in I've never even been employed at a bar, so forgive me if I'm talking on my butt here. But as far as like most nightclubs, you know, it is vodka sodas, it is just like quick well drinks and stuff like that. But I don't really feel like there's a reason why nightclubs can't serve awesome cocktails. Like you think about margaritas, you think about old fashions, like you can bash those. And so I've seen a shift personally, and like even some of the I get Vegas nightclubs that do reach out and they do want to work together, and they are like there is a shift that's happening as far as them wanting to, you know, be credible in terms of the drinks that they serve, but still cater to their audience. You know, like you don't necessarily have to drink an old fashioned or a vodka soda. You can drink an old fashioned at a high volume spot. So, which I think is super rad because I still love nightclubs. Like I'm not above.
Same.
I'm not
And
above
old fashions.
Yeah.
I don't see why we can't have both, Elliott.
You can have it all.
We can have it all. Up next, Des. So you have a trendy boutique hotel, a place that looks very much like somewhere I want to stay. You've got awesome rooms, a vibey pool, bathtubs, and a great F&B program, let's say.
All right, cool. So I knew a guy, an older ad guy, who made a lot of money in his career, and this is back when you make a lot of money in advertising. But he retired to this little town in Virginia, and he built a bed and breakfast. And when I was in the bed and breakfast, like walking through, it was so impeccably designed. It was amazing. And I asked him, I was like, who did this? He's like, I didn't hire like a decorator, I hired an art director to design this hotel, right? You know, like an advertising art director. And it was like a movie set. And that's why I feel like the best boutique hotels are designed like a movie set. You walk into the Ace Hotel, you're like, is this City of Lost Children? Like this is like a movie. It's like you walked into the set. So I thought, okay, well, what if you were, let's say you were the Ace Hotel and you hired like, you know, like an influencer from the movie industry to sort of like talk about the inspiration behind some of the items in the hotel. You know, so for instance, you know, David Lynch can talk about how this door knocker is reminiscent of like Kyle MacLachlan's like weapon in Dune, you know, or something like that. You know, I mean, just like weird stuff like that, you know, can kind of like, you know, talk about the things that make this brand experience unique and make it a destination for people next time they visit New York or New Orleans, where there's a Ace Hotel.
And then give them those cultural touchstones too. So it's like maybe they don't know Ace, but they know David Lynch and they're huge fans. So now you like almost bridged a gap there as well.
Yeah, you connected the two brands.
You finished with plenty of time, making up for Elliott going over his time. All right, Shanika, last but most certainly not least, you have craft cocktail bar. You've got handlebar mustaches, probably a leather apron somewhere. You've got that tweezer garnish going on. Big eyes, you know it. We love it. Some of you work at them, I'm sure.
Awesome. So for craft cocktail bar, we all know that craft cocktail bars often have the bartenders behind the bar. They often already have such a loyal following. And I like to look at what happens outside of the craft cocktail bar. So for this one, a lot of cocktail bars are even producing their own books. So I would outfit influencers who are in the home entertaining, lifestyle, and bartender drinks industry, and have them showcase how you can utilize the ingredients or the inspiration behind a cocktail bar at home. I know for me, oftentimes, like, I don't have the, you know, contraptions and things to make XYZ at home, but if you could assign 10 influencers a specific page and say, hey, this is my rendition inspired by X, it gives folks who might not even be based in the hot cities in which the craft cocktail bars are a chance to see, hey, one, I can do this at home, two, it's by a credible source, X craft cocktail bar, and three, just really helps showcase the drink in a nice way. One of the things that I love and hate about craft cocktail bars is, like, it's often intimate and dark, and you can't really even see the beauty sometimes of those cocktails. So I think just to kind of really put a splash on Instagram, which is the platform that I would utilize, that would be my idea.
Thank you. You guys, let's give it up for them. And your cocktail that you hopefully enjoyed, it came with a snack. I'm all about snack garnishes. Massive thank you to Grey Goose. I actually am the West Coast brand ambassador for Grey Goose, which I didn't tell you earlier when I forgot to introduce myself. My name is also Selena Dunnigan. Thank you for coming. I just want to give a huge thanks to Grey Goose for sponsoring this seminar. We have the Grey Goose Honeydew here, which is the most Instagrammed Grey Goose cocktail. It has over 10,000 hashtag mentions. And I never had one before until today, and I've worked in the brand for 2.5 years. So that is access versus actual accessibility for you right there. Also, they're not in the room, but can we just, like, applaud for the cats right now? They've been working so hard. Give them hugs when you see them in the hallway. They volunteer for this every year, and they're amazing. And they made all those little melon ball garnishes for you, which I can't believe they did. And the reason why that's the garnish is because this is the official cocktail of the US Open, as you can probably tell. So we have either, let's feel it out. We've got 15 minutes left. I have a lightning round of silly questions that I want to ask them, but I'd rather you guys ask questions if you have them. So does anybody have any questions? Whoa, oh. I don't know how far I can Bob Barker this thing, so.
Nobody touched upon
CGI influencers. Do you guys have any thoughts? CGI is like computer generated imagery. Is that what it stands for? Elliott, are you privy to this trend? The question was, CGI influencers seem to be, like, on the trend, and if anyone has any thoughts about it.
I've seen a couple, and I think that it's usually connected to, like, a purpose, right? So I think with any, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but, like, with the CGI influencer, like, just to build a profile or just to build it, I don't really see the purpose behind that, but I think more times than not, in my experience, like, I've seen, like, brands are behind it, or agencies might be behind it, and they're building it to reach, like, recently there was that, like, construction worker dad. He wasn't necessarily CGI, but turns out there was an agency behind that developed this guy, and he blew up. I think he's at, like,
it's like a modern day
like,
Barbara.
yeah, he's like a million followers now, and a lot of people have eyes on him, but there was a lot of strategy and stuff that went behind that, and it was for a purpose. So do you feel like that answered your question?
Well, I'm mostly just wondering if you all are starting to think about engaging with CGI influencers as opposed to real life influencers, and it kind of gets to the authenticity kind of aspect of what you all were doing earlier.
Yeah, how authentic are fake people?
I mean, I kind of see them as, like, cartoons as well. Like, I love cartoons.
It's
you
like
know?
Tony the Tiger.
Yeah, like I trust Tony the Tiger.
It's marketing. I trust Tony the Tiger too.
Great.
I'm gonna like project my probably own feelings on this. I'm super anti. I think that's just taking us down a really terrible path. And I would say again, if we looked at the people that I talk to, and especially the generation coming up behind millennials, they would, I suspect, be pretty horrified at the thought of that because they want things to be real. They're hyper aware, and it might be cool and it might be novel, but like in terms of level of trust, I don't know. That might, again, maybe that's just me, but I'm like, I don't know about that. And I just think people, it feels it is manufactured, and if these platforms were made to connect with real people and have communities of real people, it defeats the purpose.
I think there is some caution that you have to take. Y'all mentioned cartoons. Like, if you're marketing alcohol, you have to also be careful about who is going to be consuming that, regardless if it's a grown woman who's a cartoon or not. Like, that animated, there's a line there that you just need to be
the implications
careful.
cartoons are for children.
Exactly. And then, in addition to that, I do think if you have a strategic approach, say you do hire or outfit this guy to be a construction worker and has a million followers, then you get those eyes. It's about what you're going to do after you acquire those eyes now. Like, you've done the campaign, you've reached the follower benchmark, but now what? So I think there could be a way to kind of integrate other practices and strategies. But if you're aiming to kind of make a splash, maybe that's the way to go, but I'm not about it. So
It's the future.
I'm sort of in the same place as the rest of the panel, like proceed with caution, because these platforms are built on authenticity and unique identity, and that's what makes them special. But I've also sort of like challenged that notion, like maybe this is sort of like a signal that these channels have now gone from social media to mass media. It's like television, there's a bigger audience. Are we creating characters now, like with their own shows and content franchises? Why can't you have like a Tony the Tiger or a Charlie Tuna, like being like an influencer, somebody who has authority in this space?
Question? I feel like I need to come around with a, can I? Thank you, Shanika. I could have Bob Barker this.
Lucky me, I get the microphone. This is more, I guess, of a legal question. We own a craft cocktail bar in South Texas, and if we're taking shots of the bar with folks having a great time, is there a need for waivers, or do we need to put disclosures? I mean, any recommendations so that if we take a picture of the bar and someone's there and it's not his wife, and they come back at us? I'm just concerned with, we put a picture of somebody, can they come back at us because we didn't ask them that we were going to post that particular picture? So any thoughts on that, just to kind of see why I kind of...
Yes and no. I think that depends on what you're doing with that image. Like if that image, for example, you take a picture and you're taking photos with the purpose of putting paid media behind it or like advertising, then yeah, you would typically need some sort of model release form where they provide the consent to use their image for advertising purposes. More times than not though, like I think just with anybody, like in my experience, if I'm at a cocktail bar and then people are taking pictures, I'd be like, what are you doing? But if it's just going on your social and stuff, I think that's kind of a given that like everyone has phones and stuff, and it's, especially in my perspective, like on a local level or regional level, what you guys are doing, most people are not going to be sticklers about that. I mean, maybe one or two people, can they come after you? Like, if they want to go down that route, that's a lot of money to go down. But again, if it's an advertising campaign, then yeah, you would need to. That's different,
But it's also easy to get verbal consent, like, hey, we're just taking shots for the Instagram, So, and then verbal consent at a bar, good enough.
So if somebody's there not
For
with
this
their wife
topic.
or significant other, then they have a chance to exit.
Yeah, the guy who's getting his photo taken without his wife seems like he has bigger problems. All right, put him up so I can see.
restaurant with new concepts, do you have any insights on how to get this initial following before building relationship with those people? How to get this boost? Because it seems like hashtags and stuff like that is not as relevant with new algorithms anymore. So how to get your brand or product or restaurant out there? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think specifically with restaurant openings, a strategy that you could implement. So oftentimes you'll have a friends and family or a VIP weekend. So not aiming to reinvent the wheel given that you're still in the very green early stages. We're not looking to sponsor influencers because your money needs to be focused on your operations. So in tandem or even right before your friends and family weekend, maybe have a social media influencer weekend to where, hey, this is going to be the launch menu for the upcoming season. We'd love if you could highlight XYZ dishes, provide the influencer with all the information they need once they're there, the descriptions of the ingredients, maybe if there's an amazing chef or bartender behind that, have that individual speak to them so that way they can really grasp the information versus just kind of word vomiting and regurgitating what's in front of them. And then also even driving, you say, hey, if you're already going to do a special on the menu items anyway to the mass audience, use that as a way to also give the influencer something to provide to their audience, especially if they're in the market in which your restaurant is launching.
And how do you suggest that you build that initial contact with a influencer database?
So it's interesting. So say your restaurant is opening in, I don't know, New York City. I like to do things like look at the eater heat map and see what other restaurants have just opened. And then usually if you go to their tagged photos, you can see, all right, these are the influencers that are going to restaurants anyone opening. So like utilizing those type of resources. So that way when you do reach out, it isn't kind of out of the blue. That's one way to kind of go about it. Also like hashtag New York City restaurant, like be very specific with those kind of hashtags, use them to your advantage as a way to also filter and kind of see who's driving that content anyway.
More questions? All right, speed this up. I'm running in heels.
We're in town from Chicago. Based in Chicago. No, my question is, with the accessibility that we all have to social media, in fact, like in our own way, probably all some sort of influencer, just given the amount of friends that follow us and whatnot, is there a fear that sort of, just as we're seeing this rise of social media influencers, is there a fear that we'll also see that fall of like, because now you're worried about who to trust because everyone sort of has, some sort of audience or phone or way to contact you?
Hell yes. Is the emphatic answer. We were talking at work recently about how many people now have Finsta pages. I know I'm like a year, 2 or 12 behind on this. But I think there's these little indicators happening of people going like, wait, has this gotten too big? Have we gotten too overexposed? Have we become too influenced? And so that's where I think it comes back to just really thinking like, if you're going to use influencer marketing as a strategy, like how are you doing it really responsibly, and like, are you actually providing positive, meaningful influence versus just noise? And of course, if you're building a brand, like you're gonna think like, this isn't noise, this is awesome, this is my brand. But I just always ask to like, or encourage everyone to come at it from the end. Like, who's receiving the message? Like, is it really meaningful to them to just know about some random special, or is there something else that you're giving them that they would find meaningful?
Yeah, I will say, like, I'll piggyback that, like, I don't think, like, if things potentially fall and, like, they're kind of skeptical about who to trust and stuff, I don't really feel like value doesn't necessarily go away. So if you are providing value, and if you are doing, I think it's also important to diversify, not just do one thing. Like, for example, me with the bartending community, like, you guys don't need me to tell you how to make drinks. Like, if anything, I'm going to you, and I'm learning, and I'm seeing trends that I apply to home, but for people at home, they might not necessarily know anything about bartending or how to get into it. They might be intimidated. So kind of segmenting your audience and knowing like what each person needs or which each segment needs and giving that to them and delivering that value, because I think that when it's focused on value, people are going to sense that. And when you're, I think just as simple like as this, like people know when you're bullshitting them and when you're not. And so I think just trusting that people will gravitate to those who add value to them, and shy away from those that aren't really looking to provide value.
I mean, the way I always think about it, or the advice we give brands that we work with or that come to us, is like, you're solving a business problem and we're gonna help you with that, but you have to think about what's the people problem that you're solving. Like, what's the thing you're doing for people, and in turn, that's gonna help you solve your business problem. So it's just a different lens.
Thank you guys. One last question.
So I've read that Instagram is experimenting with hiding likes, especially in the style, fashion Instagram community for mental health reasons. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you think it'll affect the liquor industry?
Did you guys get that one?
It's in Canada and Australia, right? Like, it just came out this week.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it can be helpful in some ways. From like the influencer side of it, I've met a lot of people who unfortunately have riled themselves up to where they are driven by that like number, but it allows the consumer and audiences to look at the quality and the value of the content. Your narrative certainly shifts when you know that you're not having to worry about garnering X number of likes in order to fulfill the campaign's desires, which I think is crazy. But in some ways, I think that it is helpful. Again, we haven't really implemented and put it into practice simply because it is very early on, but it allows you to really take a step back and say, all right, I'm not so worried about hanging my hat on getting someone with 25,000 followers, 75,000 followers, if their quality of their content piece is there, it'll shine through regardless of numbers or not.
And the second part she asked was, do you think it will affect the liquor industry?
I happen to find the liquor industry to be very one of the things I enjoy most is like the camaraderie of it, and I think if you're aiming to kind of really drive and support one another, and it happens to be in the form of Instagram as well, I don't think that'll go away. And of the industries, fashion, beauty, style are the ones that really drive those numbers, and wine and spirits is still a little down the totem pole there. So I don't personally, yeah, exactly. So the answer's no.
Well, guys, that is our time. 30 seconds to spare, so thank you for having exactly that many questions. Thank you so much. We know you had so many options this week of where you could go, and we're so excited that you spent the morning with us. Again, if you see a cat, hug them. Can we give it up for Grey Goose, our sponsor today? And like shameless self-plug, at 2 p.m. today, we will be doing the Grey Goose Great Bar Race. It's going to be in between Royal and Bourbon on Bienville, right outside the other door of this Nesta, and it's super fun. It's like an obstacle course, means like a shift behind the bar. Anyone can come and sign up to do it if we have time, or you can come squirt people doing it with water guns, and you can drink a Grey Goose instead of. So it's a win all around.